Most people think of motels as simple places to rest your head during a long trip. Cheap, easy, forgettable. But there's a reason so many horror stories begin in one. Motels are usually built on lonely stretches of highway, far from police stations and crowded neighborhoods. They're often owned by families, passed down for decades, with rooms that haven't changed much since the 70s or 80s. And unlike big hotels, motels don't always have security cameras in every hallway or anyone on duty who will hear you if you scream. Over the years, motels have been the backdrop for countless real-life mysteries, unsolved disappearances, violent crimes, and strange deaths that never made national news. Some travelers vanish overnight. Others check in and never check out. And the creepiest part? Many of these rooms stay in rotation. You could sleep in the very same bed where something awful happened years ago and never even know it. Tonight, we're stepping into that world. 3 stories, 3 different travelers. Each one thought their stay would be nothing more than a quick night's rest, until they discovered the dark, hidden side of roadside motels. I've been on the road most of my adult life. Not for vacations, not for fun, for work. I'm a delivery driver for a company that specializes in moving high-value items across states. Sometimes it's expensive electronics, sometimes rare antiques. I've hauled everything from medical equipment to grandfather clocks. The pay is decent, but the hours are long, and I often find myself hundreds of miles from home, needing a place to sleep for just one night before moving on. Because I'm not rich, I usually stick to small roadside motels, the kind with faded signs and parking lots lit by a single buzzing street lamp. They're not glamorous, but they're cheap, and when you've been driving 10 hours straight, you don't care about luxury. You care about a bed and 4 walls. That night, I was heading east through Missouri. It was late October, the kind of night where the air feels damp and cold enough to cut through your clothes. Around 10:15 p.m., the rain started. At first, just a drizzle. Then suddenly, sheets of water pounded my windshield. My wipers worked hard, but they could barely keep up. The road ahead became a blurry tunnel of headlights and rain. My shoulders were tight from gripping the steering wheel, and my eyes stung from focusing too hard. I passed one Motel 6 sign, but decided to keep going. It was pricier than I wanted. About 20 minutes later, I spotted another place, a low 2-story building with a flickering neon sign that read, Sunset Lodge, vacancy. The letters S and U in Sunset were half burned out, so it looked more like Sunset Lodge. The parking lot was cracked, with weeds growing through the asphalt, but I was too tired to be picky. I pulled in, parked near the entrance, and dashed through the rain into the lobby. The inside smelled like a mix of damp carpet and cigarette smoke, even though there were no smoking signs taped to the walls. The carpet under my shoes squished slightly, not soaking wet, but enough to make me wonder if the roof had a leak. A TV in the corner was playing an old black and white movie at low volume. Behind the counter stood a tall, thin man with sunken cheeks and pale skin. His dark hair was slicked back, but it looked greasy, like it hadn't been washed in a while. His eyes were an odd gray color, and they didn't blink much. "Cash or card?" he said. His voice was flat, slow, almost as if it took him effort to speak. "Card," I replied, fishing my wallet from my jacket. He slid a form across the counter for me to sign. His fingernails were long and yellowed, and for some reason, I found myself staring at them longer than I should have. When I handed the form back, he reached under the counter and pulled out a key attached to a cracked plastic tag. Written on the tag in faded black marker was, "Room 19, end of hall." "You're the last room on the right," he said, looking me directly in the eyes. "Keep your key with you. The door locks behind you. No, enjoy your stay." No smile. Just those words. I thanked him quietly and made my way down the hall. The hallway was long, lined with dark brown carpet that had stains in random spots. The air was cold, colder than the lobby, and carried the faint smell of something sour like spoiled food. A row of dim ceiling lights buzzed overhead, one of them flickering every few seconds. My footsteps echoed, even though the hallway wasn't that big. Room 19 was indeed at the very end, right next to the emergency exit door. The number plate was crooked, and the paint on the door was chipped around the handle. When I stepped inside, the first thing I noticed was the smell, stronger than in the hallway. A mix of mold and something metallic, like old coins or dried blood. I told myself it was probably rust in the pipes. The room had one queen bed, a dresser with an old box-style TV, and a single chair by the window. The curtains were thick and heavy, patterned with faded flowers. I set my bag on the dresser and called my wife to let her know I'd made it safely. She answered, but the call kept cutting out. The signal outside had been fine, so it didn't make sense. After a few attempts, I gave up and decided to shower before bed. The bathroom was small and smelled faintly of mildew. The mirror was scratched, and the light above it flickered every few seconds. While I was shampooing my hair, I thought I heard something, soft footsteps, coming from the main room. Not the hallway, inside my room. I froze, water dripping down my face. My heart started beating faster. "Hello?" I called out. No answer. I quickly rinsed off, grabbed a towel, and stepped out of the bathroom. The room was empty, but the chair by the window had been turned to face the bed. I was sure it had been facing the wall earlier. Trying to stay calm, I checked the door locked. The window locked. I told myself I was just tired and imagining things. I turned on the TV for background noise, climbed into bed, and closed my eyes. I woke up to the sound of 3 loud knocks. My eyes shot open. I glanced at the door, but the sound wasn't coming from there. It was coming from the wall behind the bed. 3 knocks. Silence. 3 more knocks. I sat up, my chest tight. I leaned close to the wall and listened. That's when I heard it, a faint whisper. I couldn't make out the words at first, but then someone said, "Leave." My blood ran cold. I grabbed my phone and called the front desk. The man answered after several rings. "Yeah," he said, sounding annoyed. There's someone knocking on the wall in my room. Room 19. Can you check the room next to mine?" He was silent for a moment, then said, "There's no one in that room. Been empty for years." I stared at the wall, my heart pounding. "Then what's in there?" Another pause. Then, "If you want to leave, you can. I'll refund you half. No concern. No explanation. Just that." I decided then, and there I was leaving. I got up, started throwing my things into my bag. That's when I heard it, soft footsteps moving toward me from the bathroom. I turned my head slowly, every muscle in my body tense. The bathroom was dark now. I could just barely make out the shadowy doorway. "Who's there?" I whispered. No answer. Then the sound of someone breathing, slow and deep. I didn't even bother zipping my bag. I grabbed it, yanked the door open, and ran down the hallway without looking back. My shoes thudded against the carpet as I passed one flickering light after another. When I reached the front desk, I tossed the key onto the counter. The man didn't say a word, didn't even look up from whatever he was writing. I ran to my truck, rain soaking me in seconds. I drove off, my hands shaking. The next day, I couldn't get the night out of my head. I pulled over at a diner for breakfast and, out of curiosity, searched the motel on my phone. The very first result was an old local news article from 2009. A man had been found beaten to death in room 19, sitting in the chair by the window. Police had never caught the killer, and I realized something then. The chair in my room, the one that had been moved, was facing the bed, just like someone had been sitting there, watching me sleep. Back in 2018, I was on a long road trip from Texas to California. I was moving for a new job, and instead of flying, I decided to drive so I could bring a lot of my things with me. The plan was to take 3 days to get there, stopping each night at small roadside motels. I wasn't picky. As long as the place was cheap and clean, it worked for me. On my second night, somewhere in rural New Mexico, I realized I'd driven farther than planned. The sun had set hours ago, and my GPS showed nothing but empty desert around me for miles. Finally, a glowing sign appeared in the distance. Desert Star Inn, vacancy. It was an old, single-story building shaped like a long rectangle, with the lobby in the middle and rooms stretching out to either side. A couple of dim yellow streetlights lit the cracked parking lot. There were maybe 4 cars parked there total. Inside the office, the air smelled faintly of coffee and something sweet, maybe cinnamon. A radio played softly in the background. Behind the counter stood an older man, probably in his 60s, wearing a button-up shirt tucked neatly into slacks. He smiled warmly when I came in. "Evening," he said. "Need a room?" "Yes, just for the night," I said. He didn't seem rushed. He asked where I was coming from, where I was headed. I told him about my move to California, and he nodded like he understood the exhaustion of a long drive. "You're in luck," he said, sliding a key toward me. "Room 6. Nice and quiet, right by the lobby. If you need anything during the night, just knock on the office door." It was a friendly gesture, but something about his tone made me think he actually meant it, like he expected I would need something. Room 6 was right next to the office, just as he'd said. It was small but tidy, a queen bed with fresh sheets, a dresser with an old box TV, and a closet with sliding wooden doors. The bathroom was spotless, though the water pressure was weak. The window looked out toward the parking lot, with a clear view of the road beyond. After bringing in my bag, I locked the door, kicked off my shoes, and lay down. I didn't even turn on the TV at first. The quiet felt nice after hours of road noise. Sometime after 2 a.m., I woke up to a scratching sound. At first, I thought it was coming from outside, maybe a tree branch hitting the wall. But the sound was too close, too sharp. It was coming from inside my room. From the closet. I sat up in bed, listening hard. Scratch. Pause. Scratch, scratch. My chest tightened. I told myself it was probably a mouse. Still, I turned on the lamp and slowly approached the closet. The scratching stopped the second I touched the door handle. I slid the door open. Nothing. Just a spare blanket folded on the shelf, a couple of hangers, and empty floor space. I stood there for a moment, heart still racing, then laughed quietly at myself. "It's an old building," I muttered. "Probably just settling." I turned off the lamp and climbed back into bed. About 10 minutes later, there was a soft knock on my door. 3 taps. Then silence. I froze. It was the middle of the night. No one should be knocking. I called out, "Who is it?" A man's voice answered, "It's the night clerk. You dropped your wallet at check-in." Relieved, I swung my legs over the bed and grabbed my phone from the nightstand. And that's when I saw it. My wallet was right there, next to my phone. Every muscle in my body tensed. I crept to the door and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. I backed away from the door and immediately called the office. The clerk answered on the second ring, his voice groggy like I'd woken him. "This is room 6, I said, my voice shaking. "Did you just come to my door?" "No," he said firmly. "I haven't left the office all night." I told him about the knock, about the voice, about the wallet. There was a pause on the line, and then he said something that made my blood run cold. "Do not open the closet again. Leave your things. Come to the office right now." The way he said it, low and urgent, told me not to argue. I slipped on my shoes, grabbed my phone and keys, and unlocked the door as quietly as possible. The hallway was silent. My eyes darted toward the closet as I passed it. I could swear the door was open just a few inches wider than before. I stepped outside and went straight to the office. The clerk was waiting, the door already unlocked. He ushered me inside and quickly locked it again. He poured me a cup of coffee with hands that were trembling slightly. Then he told me why he'd sounded so serious. A few years ago, room 6 had been rented long-term to a man in his 40s. He'd been quiet, kept to himself, until one day he disappeared. Completely. No checkout, no forwarding address. Just gone. Police searched the room, but found nothing. The case went cold. Since then, several guests had complained about strange things in that room. Scratching in the closet, the door sliding open by itself, hearing voices at night. One couple swore they heard someone breathing inside the closet while they slept, he said. They left in the middle of the night. I asked if he thought it was haunted. He shook his head. I don't know what it is, he said quietly, but I know I don't want anyone in that room after dark. In the morning, I checked out without going back for my bag. I left behind clothes, toiletries, even my charger. I didn't care. I just wanted to get back on the highway. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The motel grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared behind the rise in the road. But for the rest of that day, I couldn't shake the feeling that if I had opened that closet one more time, I might not have left that room at all. Two years ago, I made the drive from Denver, Colorado to Phoenix, Arizona, a trip I'd done a couple of times before. I normally break it into 2 days because I hate driving all night. My plan was simple: leave Denver around noon, drive 8 to 9 hours, stop at a motel near the New Mexico, Arizona border, sleep, and finish the rest of the trip the next day. That evening in late October, the weather was perfect for driving: cool desert air, a warm orange sunset fading into deep blue. The highway stretched out in front of me, empty except for the occasional semi-truck rumbling past. My GPS said there was a small town coming up with a few motels. It was already after 8 p.m., and I'd been on the road for hours. My legs were stiff, and I was ready to be horizontal for the night. The town was more like a cluster of businesses along the highway: a gas station, a diner, a closed thrift store, and 2 motels facing each other. The first motel looked awful: chipped paint, boarded up windows, and a hand-painted vacancy sign that flickered unevenly. The second one was better: Mesa View Motel. Its sign was clean, glowing in bright green letters. The building had a fresh coat of paint, and a few decorative cacti lined the sidewalk. The parking lot was small, maybe 20 spaces, and about half full. I noticed the cars parked closer to the office were newer: sedans, SUVs, a couple of pickups. But far in the corner, where the light from the street lamp barely reached, there was an old white van. It wasn't just old, it looked wrong. The paint was chipped in several places, revealing rust underneath. The license plate was from out of state and slightly bent. Most unsettling of all, the side windows were covered from the inside with faded floral curtains. Not blinds, not tint, curtains, the kind you'd see in a 1970s living room. I remember thinking that it looked exactly like the kind of vehicle you'd see in crime stories. I told myself it was none of my business. Maybe it belonged to a construction worker or someone traveling on the cheap. But something about how far it was parked from the other cars, almost like it didn't want to be noticed, made me uneasy. Inside the motel office, the air smelled faintly of coffee and cleaning products. The lobby was small, just a counter, a rack of tourist brochures, and a TV playing muted news. Behind the counter stood a young woman, maybe mid-20s, with her dark hair tied back in a ponytail. She looked tired, but she managed a polite smile when I came in. "Checking in?" she asked. "Yeah, just for one night," I said. She handed me a form to sign and scanned my ID. Then, as she slid the key card toward me, her expression shifted slightly. Her voice dropped just a little. "Make sure you lock your door and windows, even the bathroom one." The way she said it, not like a friendly reminder, but like a warning, made me pause. "Is there a reason?" I asked. She hesitated, then forced a small smile. "It's just better to be safe." And that was it. My room was on the ground floor, toward the back. The lights along the walkway cast long shadows, and the hum of the neon sign buzzed faintly in the distance. As I walked past the corner of the building, I glanced toward the far end of the lot and saw movement near the white van. A woman was standing next to it. At first, I thought she was looking at the van's side door, maybe unlocking it. But when she shifted slightly, I saw her face in the dim light. She looked to be in her late 40s or early 50s, with long, tangled hair streaked with gray. She wore a long brown coat that looked heavy and outdated. And she was barefoot, standing on the cracked pavement. Her head turned slowly toward me, and I froze. She was looking directly at me, not casually glancing, locking eyes. I quickly unlocked my room, stepped inside, and locked it behind me. But the image of her standing there, unmoving, stayed in my head. About 20 minutes later, I decided to grab a snack from the vending machine near the lobby. I stepped outside and immediately noticed her again. She was no longer by the van. She was standing halfway across the lot, facing my room. I walked toward the vending machine, pretending not to notice her. But as I passed, she spoke. "You're in my room," she said. Her voice was soft but shaky, like she was holding back anger or tears. I tried to be polite. "I think you're mistaken. I just checked in." Her lips curled into a wide smile, the kind where only the mouth moves, not the eyes. "It's mine. You'll see." I hurried back to my room, locked the door, and shut the curtains. Over the next hour, I couldn't stop myself from peeking through the blinds. She was still out there, pacing slowly near the van, occasionally stopping to stare directly at my door. Sometimes she'd disappear into the shadows, only to reappear minutes later, closer than before. At one point, I thought I saw movement inside the van, a shadow shifting behind the curtains, but it was too dark to be sure. I told myself she was just some eccentric guest. Maybe she'd had too much to drink. Still, the clerk's warning echoed in my mind. Lock your door and windows. Around 11:30 p.m., I heard faint footsteps outside, then a slow dragging sound, like something being pulled along the pavement. I looked out, and my stomach dropped. She was standing directly outside my window. Her face was inches from the glass, but the heavy curtain hid me. I could see the faint outline of her head turning, scanning up and down the wall, like she was checking the other rooms too. Then she stepped away, out of sight. At 12:10 a.m., the tapping started. At first, I thought it was rain, but it wasn't raining. The sound was metal against metal. I crept to the door and looked through the peephole. She was there. She had a bent wire, a coat hanger, and was sliding it between the door and the frame, working it back and forth. Her expression was focused, almost blank, as if she'd done this many times before. I backed away, my pulse racing, and grabbed my phone. When the clerk answered, I whispered, "There's a woman trying to break into my room." The clerk's voice was tense. "Is she wearing a long coat?" "Yes." "Stay where you are. Security's on the way." I watched through the peephole. She worked at the lock for another 30 seconds, then froze, her head snapping toward the sound of footsteps approaching. The motel's security guard, a tall man in a reflective vest, came around the corner. She didn't say a word. She turned and ran toward the van. The side door slid open before she reached it, like someone inside already knew she was coming. She jumped in, and the door slammed shut. The van roared to life and sped away without headlights, swallowed by the dark highway. The guard knocked, and I opened the door just enough to talk. He told me she'd been hanging around for months, always with the same van. They suspected she wasn't actually staying at the motel. She just parked somewhere nearby, watched for lone travelers, and either tried to lure them outside or break into their rooms. "We think there's someone else in the van," he said. "She's never alone." He offered to move me to a different room for the night, but I was too shaken to move. I double-checked every lock and kept the TV on for noise. At dawn, I loaded my bags into the car quickly. The lot was quiet, but as I pulled onto the road, I glanced in the rearview mirror and froze. The white van was parked just down the street, half hidden behind a billboard. Its engine was running. It was facing the motel. I didn't stop driving until I was an hour away. Even then, I kept checking my mirrors. Maybe the next time you're on a road trip, tired and desperate for sleep, you'll think twice before pulling into that quiet little motel on the side of the highway. Because no matter how clean the sheets look, no matter how friendly the person at the front desk seems, you can't ever be sure what happened in that room before you got there. Some say the walls of these old motels hold on to the fear of the people who stayed there before you. Others believe that certain rooms are never truly empty. So if you hear soft footsteps in the hallway at 3 a.m., or a knock on your door when no one's outside, Don't tell yourself it's just the wind. And whatever you do, don't open the door. If these stories kept you looking over your shoulder tonight, hit like so more people can discover it, and subscribe for more true-style horror tales every week. Just don't watch them alone.